The chaotic timeline of the Doom series is full of wars between good and evil. Angels versus demons and the Doomslayer versus the Dark Lord are just two of many that raged on and led to the deaths of many. On the planet of Argent D'Nur, there was an entire army that had been formed from the trials they had endured just to survive. An army that sought to protect not only their world from danger, but also the many worlds and civilizations they encountered across the universe on their crusade under the banner of the Maykr gods. A crusade that would make them the strongest army in the universe. What led to the formation of the Night Sentinels? What led to their fall? And how does their story ultimately end? Here, we explore in the lore and story behind the Order of the Night Sentinel in the Doom series. In the earliest years of the Argenta, the tribes were forced to hide from the giant ancestrals that wandered the planet of Argent D'Nur. They were extremely territorial and attacked anything they believed would attempt to take their land from them. These ancient tribes saw death daily on this hostile world, and they were forced to hide in the dark. Over the years in the shadows, they discovered the secrets of the sword and constructed sweltering mountain forges to beat steel until it was strong enough to sever flesh. They had endured so much in their short time on the planet, but even after years of training in combat, they were no match for the mighty ancestrals. In the distance, a giant shard was always visible, unknown to the Argenta. Inside, a race of powerful beings watched over the land. The Wraith had travelled to Argent D'Nur, and with their natural power, they had given life to a once barren rock. The issue was that the ancestrals had also formed from their magic. These beasts sought to only conquer and destroy, whereas the Argentan tribes appeared to care for the little land they occupied. So, the Wraith decided to intervene. The Argenta had grown into strong, resilient warriors. They just needed a little more power to fight back against the ancestrals. The Wraith were beings of great power, and to help the tribes, they appeared to them and blessed them with their magic. Wraith Essence. The acquisition of Wraith Essence reignited a fire within the Argentan tribes. They all came together with their swords, shields, and magic and fought back the ancestrals into the valleys. This was an important moment in Argentan history. This was their land now, and so it began the time of man. The Wraith had allowed this species to act as a seed of a civilization that had formed from warriors. As the Argenta expanded across Argent D'Nur, several cities, villages, and hamlets formed to house the growing population. They tilled the fertile land, husbanded beasts of burden, and constructed the hallowed palace. It was in here that they crowned their first king, King Omero the Father, on the obsidian throne to guide the species. To thank the Wraith for the blessing that had allowed them to fight back the ancestrals, the Cathedral of Reflection was constructed to worship them. In charge of this was the Order of Daig, run by 3 Argentan priests. The Argenta were thankful to the first ones, the old gods or just the Wraith, for their power, and they honoured them in any way they could. The sons and daughters of this land either chose the path of the sword or the path of the alchemist. For the years to come, Taras Nabad became the capital city of Argent D'Nur, and it was quickly viewed as the crown jewel of the Argentan Empire. It was home to the royal family and was considered the centre of political power. The Argenta had come so far from their dark mountain forges into grand cities with statues of their gods and king, but they still suffered with issues. Having given the Argenta their gift of Wraith magic, the Wraith withdrew and watched from a distance. This Wraith magic powered the weapons of the Argenta, their technology, and general life. Yet, Argent D'Nur suffered from storms and earthquakes. While this destroyed some of their buildings, temples, and constructions, the population rebuilt. For some of the tribes of the Argenta that did not join the Argentan Empire, they walked the life of a barbarian and attacked the weakest settlements they could for food, gold, and glory. There was also the small issue of the Wraith call. The magic of the Wraith still echoed in the air. This pure power had given life to almost everything on the planet, but the weakest minds grew mad to its call. King Omero looked out into the empire he had helped form and knew that there was something he could do to make life easier for his people. While the Argenta had formed from tribes of warriors, many had settled into a normal way of life. There were, however, some who embraced the Wraith Call and attempted to protect the innocence of the kingdom. These warriors had risen above the fire, their bodies and souls tempered, and they had forged an unbreakable will in battle. These were the strongest of the Argenta. As decreed by King Omero the Father, the first king of Argent D'Nur, he established the Order of the Night Sentinel. As the first of many supreme commanders of the Night Sentinel, he trained his warriors to defend innocents and, most importantly, the Wraith. To keep their orders safe, inquisitors were tasked to deal with any of suspicious character and reported their findings to the king. The warriors focused their minds on the perfection of the art of conquest, and they trained their bodies to perfection. This was an exclusive order, and no outsiders were permitted to join the group, no matter their achievements. As guardians of the Wraith, the Night Sentinel had a unique connection to the nature and history of Argent D'Nur. This land was full of creatures that lived outside the borders of the Argentan civilization. One of these species was the Windtherin, giant reptilian beasts similar to that of dragons from human mythology. Whether these originated on Argent D'Nur or were also alien just like the Wraith is unknown. Yet, the Night Sentinel learned how to tame and train these beasts as they rode them into battle against their enemies. This mutual respect between species allowed the Night Sentinel, and in turn the Argenta, to rely on the Windtherin for other duties. The Wraith were worshipped by most of the Argenta. From the grander cities to small villages, many of the population often embarked on pilgrimages to the World Spear, the resting place of the Wraith. The issue was getting to it. To honor the Wraith and help these worshippers reach the nether lakes that housed the spear, the Torch of Kings was constructed. When lit, this let everyone in the region know that a pilgrim had reached this point, and it also alerted the local Windtherin. Upon their summon, the pilgrims were given a ride to the nether lakes on the back of the creatures. Alongside the Night Sentinel in battle, giant wolves accompanied the hardest warriors. These were faster and stronger than other beasts of their kind, and they became synonymous with the Order. Alongside statues of the Night Sentinel, wolves were also depicted as side companions. The Order, however, still had its secrets, as they never revealed the origin of these larger variations of the beasts. In battle, the Night Sentinel also utilized the technology their scientists had invented, along with Wraith magic, to develop energized swords, spears, and blades. They even constructed large ballistas that launched giant balls of Wraith energy at their enemies. The Night Sentinel were the strongest and most respected army across the whole of Argent D'Nur. Yet still, the population still suffered with issues. By the time the Argenta had crowned King Etrex generations later, the planet had entered what was named the Time of Grief. Although the Night Sentinel still served with everything they had, the rest of the population felt abandoned by the Wraith. Barbarians killed innocents, and natural disasters destroyed so much. A Great Depression swept across the land like a long, dark shadow. Then from the skies, white porcelain beings appeared from another world. These beings introduced themselves as the Maykr. They had watched the Argenta thrive from nothing and they admired them. In these dark times, they wanted to help. At first, in fear, the Night Sentinels quickly learned that their swords held no weight against the ethereal flesh of the Maykr. The beings claimed to be able to move through time and space through dimensions. The Maykr offered knowledge and eternal peace in the holy realm of Urdak upon the death of their physical form, a place for their souls to reunite with those they had lost. The Wraith had allowed this civilization to grow, but since then, they had received very little. In the warm embrace of the Maykr, this angelic species asked for only one thing in return: worship. King Etrex looked at these beings and weighed up what he had been asked to do. They already worshipped the Wraith. However, with the best interest of his people in mind, the king accepted the offer of the Maykr and a new age began in Argent D'Nur, an age of peace and prosperity. As for the Night Sentinel, they also accepted the Maykr as their new gods, but they continued with their duties as guardians of the Wraith. They still watched over the Torch of Kings, guarded the King and Order of Daig, who transformed their holy doctrine from the Wraith to the Maykr. This was an incredibly critical moment in Argenta and Night Sentinel history. Sadly, it would become a decision they would heavily regret years later. As promised by the Maykr gods, the Argenta were gifted with great knowledge and a place for their souls to rest for eternity. Argentan scientists worked with the Maykr to develop new technologies, weaponry, war machines, and constructions. One of the greatest gifts the population received was the knowledge of spaceflight, a way to explore further than they ever had before. Sentinel warships of both Maykr and Argenta design folded space to access new regions. Powered by Wraith energy, the Night Sentinel and other Argenta explored new worlds under the banner of the Maykr. Some were colonized into new regions for the Grand Civilization. The species they encountered were converted into the Maykr faith with the same promises they had been offered. And for some planets that did not cooperate or reacted aggressively to the arrival of the Argenta, they were met with hostility from the might of the Night Sentinel army. The Night Sentinel were not only the strongest army on their homeworld, but they also became a strong force in the universe. Despite the success of the conversion of another species, the leader of the Maykr, the Khan Maykr, still had an issue to deal with. An issue that would ultimately dismantle all of the hard work she and her species had put into this planet. The Khan Maykr was a powerful entity. During her reign as the leader of this godlike species, the father, her god, had disappeared without a trace. This was a huge problem for her kind as they relied on his power to keep them alive. Without him, they were susceptible to a process dubbed the Transfiguration, an excruciating fate of mental and physical degradation. While she had attempted to remain focused as a leader, she worried about the survival of her species. In the infinite conscious matrix of the all-seeing Maykr god mind, a prophecy was born. Across every possible future timeline, those who watched over this matrix saw one constant across every future, a destroyer that would bring about the destruction of the Maykr. This prophecy worried the Khan even more than she already was. Someone would threaten her rule and the future of her species. She had to stop them. But who was this chosen one? The Khan Maykr believed this person to be close to her on Argent D'Nur, and who better to destroy her than one of the strongest of the Night Sentinel. In the time of King Rowan, the Khan approached him on his throne. She explained that she had foreseen a schism in the blood of the Argenta and that a test was required to discover the identity of the host. To achieve this, she had developed a holy writ. With the help of Maykr Scholaris, the divinity machine was developed within the Chapel of Purity in Taris Nabad. Unknown to the population, and even the Khan Maykr, she had been guided by the whispers of the Dark Lord in its construction. To power it, the Khan had even travelled to the mountains of Encremon to recover a shard of the Dark Lord himself. This was an incredibly powerful machine. The Argenta were told that it would help cleanse them of any impurities, when in reality, it was created just to find the Chosen One. The strongest warriors of the Night Sentinel picked by the Khan Maykr were ordered to participate in this rite in which they were placed into the machine. Every time a warrior entered, the power of the machine destroyed not only their bodies but also their souls. The Khan claimed that the Chosen One, a dark, malicious entity, would threaten their way of life and safe passage into the heavenly realm of Urduk. The deaths of a few soldiers were worth the sacrifice to continue their way of life. For the many generations to come, the Khan selected those she believed to be a threat to her rule, and one by one, they perished. Yet still, the future timelines did not change. By the time King Novik was crowned as King of Argent D'Nur, generations and countless Night Sentinel had been destroyed by the divinity machine in the Khan Maker's quest to discover the Chosen One. The Night Sentinel had conquered the galaxy and new worlds were now home to new civilizations. One was even constructed in the Sol system of the Milky Way galaxy on the planet of Mars. Habeth became a port city, and through the use of slipgate technology, the Night Sentinel army traveled great distances in mere seconds. On one day, an Outlander from another world was discovered just outside of the walls of Sentinel Prime by Sentinel scouts. He was covered in blood, scratches, and he mumbled of blood, guts, and demons. Despite his ramblings, the Argenta did not understand his language and took him to the Argentan priests of this age, Daig Grav, Daig Nilox, and Daig Ranak. They had no idea what world he had come from or how he had arrived on their planet, but he did appear to be a skilled warrior as apparent from the blood on his armor. In accordance with Argentan law, the Outlander was sent to the Colosseum. It was here that those who broke the law or deviated from the path of the Maker were provided an opportunity. If they died, they died. However, if they rose against every trial inside, they were given the chance to fight for Argent D'Nur as they spread the word of the Maker, to give their lives for a greater purpose. The spectators of the arena watched as this Outlander roared rip and tear as he unleashed his fury on all around. Although human, some noted that his determination and power echoed that of any true-born Sentinel. Upon his survival of the arena, the Outlander was given a place in Argent D'Nur's army. The Khan Maykr was intrigued by this human. After she ordered her subjects to learn his language, she became curious about the land he had survived, a realm of hell, torture, and pain. This place could offer her the power she needed to save her species. On the eve of the Black Star, the Unholy War began as demonic entities flooded through in waves from swirly, fiery gates from their dimension. The horrendous creatures that the Outlander had spoken of were real, and they had only one goal: to claim as many souls as they could. The Night Sentinel came together and rushed towards these invaders from another dimension, and they fought them back the best they could. However, they soon heard word that the Obsidian Forests had been overrun, that the Alorum clans from the eastern mountains had fallen, and that the city of Talorum had collapsed under the weight of the hordes of demons. Still, the Night Sentinel fought alongside the other armies of Argent D'Nur. This holy army decimated countless demons, but there were always more to come. There were also reports that the Outlander that had impressed a lot of the population during his time in the Colosseum appeared to rip and tear his way through the demons with ease. He also seemed to enjoy it. The Maykr believed that the home dimension of the demons, Hell, was full of power. She needed to understand it more. To accomplish this, the Maykr convinced the Order of Dig to submit themselves completely to her will, and then they approached King Novik. The Queen Khan and the King of the Argenta discussed the incredible opportunities Hell could give them. If they were to send the Night Sentinel right into Hell, maybe they could learn more about these dimensional invaders and discover a way to purge them from Argent D'Nur. The Night Sentinel would also not have to go into this realm blind. The Outlander not only showed the ability to defend himself and those around him as he survived on the front lines of this war for much longer than any other prisoners, but he also had knowledge about Hell and its population. King Novik believed the human to be just as powerful and strong-willed as any Sentinel-born Night Sentinel. Since the age of King Omero the Father's rule, the Night Sentinel had always been an exclusive order. No Outlanders, despite their achievements, had ever been permitted to join, never mind one from another world. Yet, these were trying times. Novik's inquisitors even suspected the Outlander of some sort of secret collaboration with the demons, but the king silenced them. In a decision that surprised many, King Novik broke Sentinel tradition and deemed the human Outlander worthy of selection. While some of the Night Sentinel complained about the induction of one of the common rabble, the rest were happy to take any advantage they could against the never-ending hordes of demonkind. In his training, the Outlander learned of Sentinel traditions, the codified matrices of the Order, and ancient lessons of battle as he sparred with their Hallmasters. He was deemed an undying, unrelenting compatriot. He was an outsider, he had no friends, nor did he want any. Every time he was thrown into the dirt circle, he was battered and bruised, but this only fueled him to fight on and learn more. This was a turning point in the Unholy War. The newest member of the Order of the Night Sentinel was one of the strongest that had been inducted for as long as anyone could remember, with a guide to lead them through the realm inside the Hell Gates. King Novik gave his permission for the Night Sentinel to enter. With access to Hell, the Night Sentinel also discovered the Blood Swamps, a region in which the Father was rumoured to have been stored. It was said that his resting place was protected by the Trials of Malagog. Several Argenta did attempt to complete these trials, but they failed. As a result, their souls were bound to this place as they waited for someone to complete it. As the years passed, the Night Sentinel entered Hell 3 times on expeditions. The Outlander suffered from exhaustion, wounds, and sickness, but he never asked for help. Each battle made him stronger and showed the other Night Sentinel that he was just as dedicated, if not even more than them. Over their countless victories in battle, he showed himself to be one of Argent D'Nur's greatest warriors. Then the time came when he was no longer regarded as a new conscript. The Outlander was one of their most trusted brothers in arms, an ally and a weapon. Each trip to Hell allowed the Night Sentinel to defeat hordes of demons before they arrived on Argent D'Nur, and the information they discovered while in the realm was then relayed back to the Maykr, the priests, and the king. To help the population and the Night Sentinel, the Maykr announced that she had discovered a new power source, Argent Energy. She did not explain where this had come from, but she did explain that it would help them immensely in their war against Hell. While many of the Night Sentinel did not trust this sudden arrival of power, they could not deny the benefits it offered. The release of Argent energy into the masses removed disease, extended lives, and most importantly, the development of new weaponry, armor, and war machines powered by Argent energy allowed the Night Sentinel to fight much further into hell than they ever had before. The Night Sentinel refused to drink the sweet elixir, they just used it in their weaponry. However, the masses of the world did. As the eve of the Black Star reached its zenith, a howling darkness assembled just beyond the mountain rise to the east. With them came the Dreadnought, a titan of immense power. This was different to the countless battles the Night Sentinel had fought over their years of war with Hell. The Titan appeared to target Taurus Nabad specifically, and as it moved closer, everything in its wake crumbled. Sentinel scouts also believed that some sort of foul play was at work here. Through their traversal into Hell and ability to track the comings and goings of demonic hordes, this new wave had arrived without any warning. Some even believed treason of some kind. But why would anyone want the demons to invade their own world? To save the crown jewel of Argent D'Nur, the Night Sentinels raced towards the Dreadnought and the demons that surrounded it. They fought as hard as they could, but many of them fell to the Titan's power. What worried them even more was that the Outlander even struggled to put up a fight. In the hours before dawn, the Outlander was visited by Sama Maykr, the Chancellor to the Khan Maykr. Under a veil of secrecy, this human was taken to the Chapel of Purity and placed within the Divinity Machine. Only this time, Sama reversed the polarity of the device. Upon its activation, the human absorbed the power of the Dark Lord from the shard that powered the machine. He became stronger, faster, and even more unrelenting. He became a god in his own right. He became the Doomslayer. On the battleground of Taurus Nabad, the Night Sentinel continued to fight with the Dreadnought, but they still fell. That was until the Outlander returned with his new power. With a crucible in hand, he charged at the Titan and plunged the blade into the heart of the Dreadnought as his brothers in arms watched. The defeat of a great titan at the hands of a single sentinel was huge. The Doomslayer became revered as one of the best of their kind. However, they could not celebrate for too long as there was always more to do. With their war machines, the Night Sentinel fought even further into Hell. On another one of these expeditions, they discovered something horrific, a factory of Maykr design. As the warriors ventured deeper into the city of Necrovol, they watched as the souls of the fallen were tortured and then extracted. This power was then combined with the essence of the Wraith into Argent energy. The Maykr had constructed a factory that sorted, tortured, and extracted the souls of the people they had known. The Night Sentinel had always been suspicious of the arrival and nature of Argent energy, but even they could not have imagined how it was formed. They knew that they had been betrayed by the gods that had promised to protect them, only to have been used as fuel in a war. Enraged with their discovery, the Night Sentinel returned to Argent D'Nur and reported to the masses of their findings. This split the entirety of the civilization. The indoctrinated masses sided with their gods. Argent energy had helped the Night Sentinel fight back the demons. It had healed the sick, extended their lives, and prevented disease. The Maykr had gifted all Argenta knowledge and a place in Urdak after their deaths. How dare anyone speak against them? They believed that this new information was simply a test of their faith. On the other side of this, the Night Sentinel continued to call out the Maykr for their abhorrent acts. This split of belief triggered a civil war between those that worshipped the Maykr and those who reverted to the worship of the Wraith. Even several of the Night Sentinel turned their back on their own as brother fought against brother. Those who worshipped the Maykr fell deep into the consumption of Argent energy. Upon their deaths, these corrupted Night Sentinel were resurrected as powerful new warriors in the Maykr army against the Night Sentinel. Named Marauders, they retained all of their Sentinel training, and they even summoned corrupted Sentinel wolves to fight for them. Over the years of civil war, countless warriors died on both sides. Commander Valen even lost his own son in this conflict, in which he was plagued with dreams of his son's torture in hell. To end this conflict, the Night Sentinel came up with a plan to stop the Maykr and their collaboration with Hell. The first step was to enter Hell and close down the Argent energy factory in Necrovol, and with it, the energy spire that transferred Argent energy from Hell to Argent Dunur and Urdak. The second step was to reawaken the slumbering Wraith. These old gods had allowed the Argenta to thrive once before, and they hoped they could save them again. This was a solid plan, or so they thought. The Argentan priests appear to have stayed out of the civil war to the public, when in reality they had sided with the Khan and had been partially responsible for the creation of Argent energy and its distribution. Valen struggled to focus and lead his soldiers as a result of the nightmares that plagued him of his son. In an attempt to stop them, he visited Daig Grav. The priest explained that the nightmares that plagued him were real. His son suffered in hell, but there was something he could do to save him. All the commander had to do was hand over the keys to the Sepulchre of Elements, the resting place of the Wraith that slept. In return, not only would Grav stop his son's suffering, but he would also resurrect him. In this weakened, desperate state, Commander Valen agreed and handed over the keys. Under the impression that the Order of Daig still served the Night Sentinel, the warriors accepted the priest's offer when they provided them with access to a portal directly to the city of Necrovol to complete their mission. However, as they entered, they soon discovered that they had been betrayed. As the swirling portal hurled the warriors across the entire realm of Hell, they were separated. For those who landed near a portal to leave the realm, they discovered that the priests had shut them down. The Night Sentinel that had chosen to go on this mission each found themselves stranded, alone, and surrounded by hordes of demons that had been alerted of their arrival. These warriors put up as much of a fight as they could as they massacred the demons around them. When the Attalans ran out of fuel, they dropped to the ground and fought with them physically. Of note, the Banner Sergeant took down a great beast, and Rowan the Mighty eviscerated countless demons, but one by one, the Night Sentinel were taken out by the entities of this realm until only two remained: the Doomslayer and Commander Valen. The Slayer continued to fight across the realm as Valen set himself up a base. He knew that his actions had led to the fall of his order. He was ashamed. The priests were partially to blame, but it was because of his actions that the Maykr had access to the Wraith so that they could use their power to create more Argent energy. And it was because of his actions that his men had fallen in this realm. On Argent Dunur, the Night Sentinel that had not gone on the mission accepted that they had lost the civil war, and to avoid death or slavery, they went into hiding. The priests believed that all of the Night Sentinel had fallen. After the Torch of Kings was extinguished, the era of the Night Sentinel ended and a new one began. An era of pain, suffering, and torment under the control of the corrupt Argentan priests. The planet of Argent Dunur collapsed over the subsequent years as demonkind roamed the streets freely without restriction. The spirits of the fallen remained within and hoped that one day, a great warrior would return and help restore the planet back to its glory before the corruption of the priests and the betrayal of the Maykr. The last king of Argent Dunur's spirit also remained in his throne room. It has not been declared how King Novik died, but he remained true to the Night Sentinel to the end. Many years later, the Sentinel that had gone into hiding were surprised to see the Torch of Kings ignite. This moment signified to all around that several things had happened. That the spirit of the Night Sentinel was still alive, the Order of Daig and the Maykr had fallen, and that it was finally time to reclaim their planet. Over the following hours, the Night Sentinel were approached by Commander Valen. They knew that he had betrayed them, but over his years of exile, he had attempted to make amends. He explained to them all what had happened. The Doomslayer had survived hell, he had wiped out the Argentan priests, the Khan Maykr, and he had even restored the Dark Lord into his physical form. If the Dark Lord was defeated in his own realm, then every demon outside of it would be destroyed. This is where what remained of the Night Sentinels was needed. One by one, the Night Sentinel came together with their weapons and war machines powered by the Wraith, and they entered Hell just outside its capital city of Amora with the Doomslayer. Led by Commander Valen, the Night Sentinel fought together for the first time in years as they massacred every demon they saw. As they did this, the Doomslayer made his way towards Davoth the Dark Lord. For the longest time, there was only chaos, but the Night Sentinel thrived. That was until a light emitted into the sky and the demons just stopped. The Dark Lord had been defeated, and as a result, no demon could ever leave Hell. Having completed their part of this task to aid the Doomslayer, the Night Sentinel returned to their world, and once again, for the first time in years, their flag was raised. The legendary Night Sentinel had known only war. It was an honor to serve Argent Dunur and the Wraith that had gifted them with their ability generations before. With the reignition of the Torch of Kings and their final battle in Hell a victory as a result of the Dark Lord's death at the hands of the Doomslayer, all that remained for this cast of warriors was to return to their homeworld. The Hell Priests and the Khan Maykr were dead, and all of demonkind was sealed within their unholy realm. This was a fresh start for the population of Argent Dunur, and in this new age, it is very likely that those who survived the war with Hell will revert back to their worship of the Wraith and attempt to start a new life. That is now back under the protection of the Night Sentinel. Welcome warriors to the first Doom video of 2024. After I created that small timeline, I still did not want to give up on the exploration of the lore in this universe. While the timeline covered so much of the story, there were the smaller pieces of lore that did not add too much to the story that did not make it in. Although every piece of lore is important, I wanted the timeline to focus mostly on the story, so these smaller lore videos almost act like companion guides to it. I loved the Night Sentinel, how they were forged into warriors, how they fought with wolves, conquered the universe and protected their own. I think Commander Valen had a lot of work to do to be forgiven for his betrayal of his kind, but I do think he has repaid that debt. But you could say that his actions ultimately led to the death of the Dark Lord. I think this may also be a common thought in the Doom community, but I will say it anyway. The arrival of the Outlander on Argent Dunur and the years of war against demonkind is the perfect setting for a game to be set. We know the general gist of the story. The Doomslayer arrives, he fights in the arena, joins the Night Sentinel, becomes the Doomslayer, and then the Civil War. I would still happily play through that story, and I'm sure there's a lot more information that could be added during that period. It is just a hope, maybe one day. I think that was everything I wanted to say, so please share the video, please like it if you liked it, most importantly subscribe if you are interested in seeing more lore. Finally, I would like to thank my gold tier patrons and channel members: Jonas, Lewis, Queen Arby, Fluffy the Dragon, Chicken Guy 791, Ruben Mendoza, Duke, Toadnut, Oren X, Azu, Karatana, AJ, Verona, Comfy, BG Games, Apravis, Arnis, Blaze of Glory, Cole Sherman, Yali Rodriguez, and Nabar. Would you have liked a Doom game set during the Doomslayer's arrival on Argent D'Nur? Can Commander Valen ever be forgiven for what he did? And what would you like me to cover next? Please let me know in the comments below. This is where our story ends. Check back next week for a new one.